Teachers of Reddit, what is the greatest way a student has misinterpreted one of your assignments? Former Seattle High School science teacher here. I had one particular class which was very literal, and I was cracking down on homework being late. I said, this assignment is due on Wednesday, so to get full credit, email it to me before Thursday so that I can start grading it in time before we meet again. One student actually named Kevin asked what time it should be emailed, so I said by midnight. He said midnight would be Thursday, fair point, so I clarified 11:59 p.m. would work. Another kid said he'd be in Arizona, another time zone, and asked what he should do. I smiled and announced 11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This should not have been a time crunch for anyone. This one girl emailed me Wednesday night at 11:21 p.m. saying, here it is. Sorry it's early. I stayed up an extra 2 hours waiting for 1159, but I'm just so tired and my dad wants me to go to bed. Thanks for understanding. I am a teacher, but this story was from when I was a student. In debate class we had to debate euthanasia. The kid who was supposed to argue for it went first. He started talking about how necessary it was, and how terrible it was that we didn't use it more before. He was giving all these examples of people that needed to be euthanized, people who needed amputations, people with cavities, babies. It became very clear very quickly that either this kid was a monster or he was talking about something else. The teacher asked him, Charles, are you talking about euthanasia or anesthesia? The kid replied, I have made a terrible mistake. I still quote that to this day. Cracks me up every time. As a teacher of a community college library course, I assigned a student the task of compiling a bibliography of books for high school students on the Middle Ages. Half of the bibliography contained books on midlife crisis, empty nesters and menopause. Time to share my most embarrassing moment my first year teaching. I had a foreign exchange student from France in my law class. The assignment was to write a personal narrative about an important moment in their life. Instead of reading the essays, I had my students read them aloud. If they were comfortable, this was my first mistake. The student, who will be referred to as Jay, goes up to the podium to present. Now, I need to point out that Jay did not speak often in class, and we've been working hard to get him speaking to his peers. I was so proud that he was willing to share his story. He stands up there with his essay and lets this wonderful story unfold. He proceeds to tell the class about his first time having a night emission. He said he went to school and told his friends, he was young, what happened. They suggested that he go home and wank. I thought for sure I was not hearing this story correctly at this point. My second mistake was not stopping the presentation. He was so soft-spoken and matter-of-fact that I had not caught on to where the story was headed. He then proceeds to tell the story of the first time he jerked off in the bathroom. My class was in tears. I had no idea what to do and sat there dumbfounded. I asked him why he would share something so personal. Jay responds that a narrative is a story and personal means something you wouldn't want to share. Made sense to him. I ended the class with what happens in 5th period, stays in 5th period. Students asked all the time what happened in 5th period, but as far as I knew, no one shared. Once the teacher asked us to do problems 1 to 10 for homework. One of my friends did problems 1, 2, and 10, thinking the teacher said 1 to 10 instead of 1 to 10. This happened in my first or second grade class. We were given black construction paper and chalk, and told to make a skeleton on the paper with the chalk. One of the kids started having some difficulty with the task, and the teacher along with the rest of us realized he was gluing chalk in the shape of a skeleton onto the paper, and had run out of chalk pieces. Art class. Teacher wanted 12 thumbnail sketches, small rough idea of the picture of our ideas for a painting. One girl drew her thumbnail 12 times. In first grade, we were assigned to go home and answer a few questions on loose leaf. Not knowing exactly what that was, I wandered about the woods near my home searching for leaves big enough for my writing. My mom's reaction when she asked why I was writing on leaves was priceless. Not a teacher, but in college I was in a classical mythology class, and we had to read the Metamorphoses by Ovid, an ancient text which puts together a bunch of myths into a cohesive story. Instead, some kid in my class read the Metamorphoses by Kafka, a 1914 short story about a guy who turns into a cockroach. Before class I overheard him talking to his friends, yeah, I actually did the whole reading, but why did we have to read it for this class? Dude just turns into a bug. It was weird. This one girl last year did an assignment on Hawaii, when the assignment was Iceland. She mixed up island and Iceland, and thought she could choose any island. Was a teaching assistant for a food and culture course. One of our assignments was for students to go to an area where people were interacting with or eating food with other people, and basically make some observations and answer some questions from a worksheet about people's behavior and its relevance to human culture. So, this could be something like a farmer's market, a pizza joint, or the meeting of the Mycological Society of America, my favorite entry. In each case, we asked that the students make observations of the surrounding for an hour and 15 minutes. We had a pretty broad level of acceptance for what would be an appropriate setting. One student completely misunderstood the point of the assignment and ended up, as far as I can tell, observing 2 potatoes for over an hour. The first half of the assignment was describing these observations. The second half was in answer to the final question of the assignment, which is something like, say you got funding to investigate the relationships between people and food further. What would you study? For this answer, he ended up copying and pasting the description of a YouTube video on potato life hacks. Remove tarnish from your silverware by first boiling a couple of potatoes. Remove the potatoes and set your silverware in the water for 1 hour. Then wash and rinse the silverware. Potatoes can clean silver. Why? Hold a floral arrangement in place by cutting a potato in half lengthwise and placing it cut side down. Poke holes in the potato with the scratch awl or screwdriver where you want the flowers to go, and then insert the stems. What is the advantage? So yeah. Slight misinterpretation. Edit: I cannot post a student's assignment for those asking. But part of one of the answers included it's late spring, and it's a great time to talk about potatoes. Who could argue with that? When I was in the 4th grade, my teacher told the class to write incomplete sentences for our first homework assignment. I heard it as incomplete sentences. I purposefully made all my sentences fragments. The teacher was neither impressed nor did she believe me. Preschool teacher here. Asked my students to tell me the first sound in dog. Almost everyone responded, woof. I was teaching a college history class and the students were assigned a book called Lieutenant None, about a woman who fled Spain for the New World dressed as a man and lived the rest of her life as a man. It's about 100 pages and takes about an hour to read if you are focused. One of my students bought the book online from half.com or something like that, and ended up reading 300 pages of dense feminist philosophy about gender roles in the 16th century. If nothing else, he had some very interesting contributions to our discussion that day. I gave students a list of vocabulary words to look up and define for homework. 2 of the words were atheist and polytheist. Well, I don't know where the miscommunication arose, but one student did not define either. Instead, they wrote, polyatheist. One who doesn't believe in many gods. I mean, they weren't wrong. There was an interesting student I had called Andy from Hong Kong. He never took anything seriously and could only put variant adjectives together. Very handsome, for example. I asked Andy's class to write me a cover letter for a job. Andy's response went something like this: I handsome. I have good body, strong legs, nice face. I want job McDonald's. I once asked his friend also from Hong Kong if Andy was just as whack in Cantonese. He replied, oh hell yeah, he's extremely stupid. I have browsed different subreddits for the past year but made an account just to post my worst misinterpretation of all time. In 4th grade, we were assigned a project about important events in the past 100 years. Once I completed this project on a certain individual that I was assigned, we were given another project. Historical figures. We were supposed to do research and dress up as this individual. I asked my teacher if I could just do the person I was assigned in the previous assignment and, without remembering or looking who my person was, she said yes. I was pumped. I had already done the research assignments and only needed to dress up as this person. My parents helped me put the costume together the night before and I was all prepared. That next day, I walk into school and head to the library where we were all meeting to show off our costumes. I walk in as Adolf Hitler. I see a banner. Important figures over the past 100 years. As a quiet kid, I didn't leave, but I didn't say anything the rest of the day. I guess I had missed the part where this figure for our second project was to be a hero, but no one had specifically stated this. All my friends were dressed up as presidents or war heroes or whatever, and here I was dressed as Hitler, all day. I have never had so many talks with other people's parents about the Holocaust and how bad it was. I was too nervous to explain myself and still cringe when I think about how that looked. My parents didn't think it was odd that I had to dress up as Hitler, since this project sounded almost the same as the first one, and my teacher never liked explaining anything at lengths to me. Now that I think about this, I bet she set me up. Not a teacher, but when I was in grade school I had basic math problems assigned to take home. My parents did not speak English, so I would do my homework as best I could. The question would ask what is the difference between 8 and 5. Instead of answering 3, I would describe that 8 was bigger, even, and had more circles while 5 was odd and smaller. I don't remember who or when someone corrected me. Not a teacher, but the story is still worth telling. In high school, we took quiz on Hamlet. Our teacher told us, if you get confused, remember the story is just like the Lion King. One of the questions asked how Hamlet's uncle died. Someone answered that he was thrown off a cliff and eaten alive by hyenas. I have never seen a teacher look so disappointed. Not a teacher, but a friend of mine is. And this one story of his is amazing. For one of his class projects that he assigns every year, he asks his students to build little trebuchets. Then they participate in activities for the furthest marshmallow toss, things like that. One year, he assigned the project like normal, and everything looked good. Everyone had their trebuchets on their desks but one group of 2, who were looking around pretty nervously. Teacher, did you finish your trebuchet? Students, yes. Teacher, then where is it? Students, looking nervously at each other, well, it's, outside. It won't fit inside the school, so of course, everyone had to file outside to see what the 2 of them had built. As it turns out, they had built a full-size trebuchet welded onto the back of a metal trailer, and had it towed in behind one of their father's pickup truck. I'm talking a full-on trebuchet. A little bigger than this one. Of course, everyone forgot their little popsicle stick trebuchets. They spent the next while flinging watermelons brought in by the kid's father clear across the schoolyard. Of all of his teaching stories, this is still my favorite one. In high school English, we were reading Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. One of the central themes of the book was about class, wealth struggle. The teacher asked us to write a weekly short essay with a viewpoint from a different class. A friend of mine, who always pays half attention, ended up turning in a paper from world history class on a semi-related subject. The funny thing is, he got the paper back with a check mark, meaning the assignment was complete. This info spread across the class, and people started turning in a few random papers to test the theory that the teacher wasn't actually reading the assignments. Before you know it, half the class started turning in random shit, everyone getting check marks back. It got so ridiculous that people weren't even turning in coherent sentences. This went on for about nearly 2 months, until one day when the teacher was about to give the graded papers back, she noticed one of the papers wasn't quite right. She proceeded to read through it, and that's when half the class knew we were screwed. She called out the perpetrator's name and started reading out loud his writing. It literally was, the grass is sort of green. The sky is really blue. Dirt on the floor filled the ground. Ice cream tastes good. I have to admit, it was really hard for some of us to control our laughter. She then looked at the next paper, then the next, then the next. All of them were ridiculously off topic. She flipped, started yelling and pounding the desk with her fists. She went through and gave zeros to half the class. Thank God I turned in an actual legit paper that day, as I had started getting paranoid about it when I realized too many students were doing it. TLDR, misinterpreted assignment, gave kids the idea to turn in BS work for 2 months.